You ever try to trip your friend just for fun and realize, wow, balance is a fragile thing? Well, congrats, you have just dabbled in Judo, the art of throwing people, but like, respectfully. What started as an upgrade to samurai grappling turned into an Olympic powerhouse, a UFC game changer, and believe it or not, almost got banned. Yeah, Judo's history is wild. So there we were, feudal Japan, where people were out here swinging swords like it was their full-time job. Because, well, it kinda was. Samurai ruled the battlefield, slicing and dicing their way through history. But what happened when the sword got knocked out of their hands? They did not just throw in the towel and hope for the best. No, they had Jujitsu, a combat system built on throws, chokes, joint locks, and occasionally making sure the other guy never got up again. Jujitsu was effective, but it had one big problem. It was a hot mess. There were hundreds of different styles, and no one could agree on which one was actually good. Some focused on wrestling, some on joint manipulation, some on just slapping the soul out of you. No rules, no structure. Just pure, chaotic violence. But hey, that worked just fine, until Japan decided to modernize. Fast forward to the mid-1800s, and samurai culture is dying out faster than your New Year's resolutions. The government's like, hey, swords are kinda outdated. And suddenly all of these elite warriors are out of a job. Jujitsu, yeah, it's now seen as an ancient relic, and people are more interested in Western-style military training than tossing each other onto tatami mats. It looked like Jujitsu was about to become another forgotten tradition. But then Jigoro Kano enters the chat. Now let's talk about Kano, because this dude is the ultimate underdog turned genius. Kano was born in 1860, and let's just say he was not exactly built like a warrior. Small, sickly, constantly bullied. Basically, if anime existed back then, he would be the underdog protagonist of a 12-episode training arc. But instead of just sulking about it, he did what any genius would do. He studied hard. And he did not just learn, he studied it like a mad scientist. He took notes, broke down techniques, figured out what worked and what was just flailing around dramatically. By 1882, he had a realization. Okay, Jujitsu is cool and all, but let's take out the accidentally killing people part and turn it into something better. And just like that, Judo was born. Kano stripped out the most dangerous moves, which means no eye gouging, no snapping fingers just for fun, and focused on technique over brute force. Efficiency was the name of the game. He set up the Kodokan Dojo, the first ever judo school, and got to work training students, starting with just 12 mats and a handful of people. And just so you know, Kano is the reason martial arts have colored belts. Back then, students would not shut up about "am I good yet?" So he slapped a black belt on the best ones and told the others work harder. Just like that, problem solved. And get this, he did not even wear a black belt himself, because in his mind, judo was a lifelong journey, not something that you just master one day. Little did he know he just changed martial arts forever. So there we were, Tokyo 1886, and people were arguing, like a lot. On one side, you had the old school Jujitsu guys rolling their eyes like, Kano's judo is just watered down nonsense, we've been doing this for centuries. And on the other, Judo's fresh new crew smirking like, okay grandpa, let's see if your ancient techniques still hold up. The Tokyo Metropolitan School, tired of all the bickering, finally said, you know what, let's just fight about it. Boom, 15 matches, Jujitsu versus Judo, winner gets bragging rights for life. And let's just say, it did not go well for the Jujitsu team. Judo demolished them. 13 wins, 2 draws, and exactly 0 losses. That's right, Jujitsu did not win a singular fight, not one. It was like watching a group of guys show up to a video game tournament with wired controllers, thinking they had the edge, only to get bodied by a speedrunner who knows every glitch in the game. And the real star of the show, Shiro Saigo. This guy was Kano's most dangerous student, despite being shorter and lighter than most of his opponents. But what he lacked in size, he made up for with next level technique and a throw that would make your chiropractor cry. At one point, Saigo squared off against Taro Torijima, a huge 27-year-old, 183-pound Jujitsu fighter who had been ragdolling people all day. This was supposed to be a complete mismatch, big guy versus small guy. Then boom, Saigo unleashed the legendary Yama Arashi, a throw so powerful that Torijima went flying like he got hit by a truck. He landed so hard he got a concussion and had to be carried away. That's right, one of Jiu-Jitsu's best fighters got thrown into next week. Kano had done it. He humbled the entire old-school Jiu-Jitsu community in front of a live audience. By the time the dust settled, Judo was not just a fighting style anymore, it was Japan's martial art of choice. But Kano, oh, he wasn't about to stop there. Winning in Japan was cool and all, but he had bigger plans. He was not just making a martial art, he was building a global movement. By the 1890s, Kano starts doing what every successful startup does. He scales up. He sends his best students overseas, like judo missionaries, except instead of preaching, they were throwing people on the floor in new and exciting ways. And guess what? People loved it. By 1902, judo lands in America, and it's not just some underground dojo in a basement. Harvard, West Point, even the freaking US Navy start teaching it. Oh, and speaking of insane judo fans, how about President Theodore Roosevelt? Yeah, the same guy who boxed, hunted bears, and probably chewed glass for breakfast became a judo brown belt. He even installed judo mats in the White House and practiced with world-class judoka while casually running the country. Imagine being a diplomat trying to discuss trade deals, and in the next room the president is getting hip-tossed. Meanwhile, Kano was not just chilling back in Japan, he was making moves. By 1911, he starts pushing judo into the Olympics, and by the 1930s, judo had already conquered Europe, the Soviet Union, and Brazil. Oh yeah, about Brazil, judo went there and evolved into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which eventually would become a UFC game changer. Everything was going great, and then boom, World War II shuts down everything. The US actually banned judo in Japan after the war, seeing it as too closely tied to militarism. But here's the thing, judo did not die, it just went underground. Students secretly kept training, waiting for their moment to bring it back. And then in 1940, just as the world was falling apart, Jigoro Kano passed away at sea. He was on his way back from an Olympic committee meeting, where he'd been fighting to get judo into the Olympics. Official cause of death? Pneumonia. But honestly, his heart was probably just shattered from watching his dreams get crushed by war. He had spent his whole life trying to unite people through judo, and now the world was tearing itself apart. His casket, draped in the Olympic flag, arrived in Japan, but his legacy far from over. The world was about to see judo's greatest comeback. So there we were, judo had survived World War II, gone underground, and now was ready for its next big move. But if judo was gonna go big, it needed something huge, something world stage worthy. And what's bigger than the Olympics? 1951 rolls around, and finally someone says, hey, maybe we should make this official. Enter the International Judo Federation, IJF. A bunch of serious folks in suits who would spend the next several decades debating rule changes and making sure nobody strangles each other too hard. And then 1964, Tokyo gets the honor of hosting the Olympics. And guess what? Judo is making its grand debut. Japan is hyped beyond belief. This is their thing, their martial art, their moment. This was supposed to be a clean sweep, golds in every category, easy. But then, Anton Geesink happened. Picture this, a Dutch guy towering over everyone at 6'6" walks into Tokyo like he owns the place. The Japanese heavyweights dominated. And just when Japan thought they would at least take gold in the open weight division, Geesink flips their national pride on its head and takes the gold. The stadium? Silent. Japanese fans absolutely devastated. The country that invented judo just lost their biggest match on home soil. But you know what's crazy? Even though he had just crushed Japan's hopes, Geesink told his own team not to celebrate too hard, out of respect for judo's Japanese roots. Anyways, fast forward and judo starts spreading like wildfire. 1972 through the 80s. The Soviets, the French, and the Koreans all start coming for that gold. The sport is no longer Japan's playground, it's fully global. Oh, and the women? Yeah, they finally got their shot in 1992 because apparently it takes decades of arguing to let half the population compete. And just when you thought judo had settled into its Olympic-certified, rule-polished, family-friendly status, it decided to crash another party. Enter MMA. See, by the 1990s, cage fighting was the wild west of combat sports. It was a glorious, messy brawl between karate guys, sumo wrestlers, and whatever your uncle does in his garage after 3 beers. But in the middle of this chaos, one style was dominating: Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The legendary Gracie family was steamrolling through opponents, making everyone think BJJ was unstoppable. But then, Kazushi Sakuraba happened. Nicknamed the Gracie Hunter, this absolute menace used judo-based techniques to flip, slam, and straight up humiliate some of BJJ's best fighters. He broke their guard games, stuffed their takedowns, and even made them tap. Judo had arrived in MMA and it was here to stay. Fast forward to the 2000s and another terrifying judoka started making waves. Fedor Emelianenko. Now Fedor was not just a judo guy. He was built different. This Russian heavyweight had a cold, emotionless stare and a game plan that involved throwing people like ragdolls and then punching them into oblivion. His judo sambo hybrid made him nearly unstoppable for a decade. Then came Khabib Nurmagomedov, aka the guy who made wrestling look like a horror movie. He used judo trips and throws mixed with Dagestani wrestling to dominate. And when Khabib takes you down, yeah, you're not getting up. Oh, and we cannot forget Ronda Rousey. 2010s, judo went mainstream in the UFC thanks to her. She walked in, threw people over her shoulder like grocery bags, and armbarred them before they even knew what happened. Gold medal in judo? Check. UFC champion? Done. WWE superstar? Why not? In the middle of all of this, there was one thing that kept on changing. The rules. See, once you become a worldwide phenomenon, things get complicated. People start worrying about TV ratings, safety regulations, and whether or not the sport looks exciting enough for casual viewers. And that's when the rule makers rolled in like, alright, let's tweak some things. And boy did they tweak. First, they banned leg grabs. Yup, gone. No more double leg takedowns, no more sneaky wrestling moves. You wanna grab a leg? Too bad, buddy. The idea was to keep judo pure and distinct from wrestling, but a lot of judokas were not happy. Then they added golden score. Matches now had sudden death. First point wins. Sounds exciting, right? Well, not if you are 2 minutes into overtime gasping for air knowing that one wrong step means your entire tournament run is over. Oh, and let's talk about penalties. The new system introduced Cheetos, penalties for stalling. You can't just defend and play it safe anymore. You gotta attack. No action, the ref starts handing out Cheetos like Oprah handing out free cars. Oh, and of course, some people loved the new changes. Faster matches, more action, less stalling. What's not to like? Others, they absolutely hated it. The sport they grew up with was suddenly being sanitized for TV. And then, because martial artists are never ones to just sit around and complain, they started their own leagues. Yup, bare-knuckle judo leagues started popping up, dedicated to bringing back the rough, old-school judo. Basically, judo with all the banned moves and a side of potential concussions. So what now? Where is judo heading? The sport is still an Olympic staple, and we are seeing new generations of judokas rewriting the record books. Take Shohei Ono. This Japanese machine is so dominant that when he fights, it's not even about if he wins, it's about how violently he throws you. Or Teddy Riner, the 10-time world champion who looks like he was created in a secret lab. At 6'8", 290 pounds, this guy makes grown men reconsider their life choices. Meanwhile, MMA crossovers are still happening. More fighters are realizing judo's throws and top control are seriously underrated. And remember those bare-knuckle judo leagues? Yeah, they're still growing. Some people want that old-school battlefield-style judo back. No soft landings, no turtling, just straight-up chaos. So, will judo evolve even further, or will it swing back toward its brutal samurai era roots? Time will tell.